Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. We're very pleased to announce that InterBase 15 is available today. Here's the agenda for today's webinar. First of all, what is InterBase? Just a brief run through of what InterBase is, in case you're not sure. And then we're going to talk about some of the new features, including enhanced encryption and security, InterBase tooling modernization, and then some changes to support and maintenance, good ones. And then we're going to do a quick demo to show you what it can do and how it works. And then we're going to summarize everything that we've shown you. First, let's start talking about what InterBase is, what InterBase is in the real world today. What is InterBase? Well, InterBase is a SQL-based, ACID-compliant, highly secure, cross-platform, low-maintenance, and we really mean that, relational database management system, RDBMS. It is high performance. It's embeddable. You can use it embedded or you can use it in a server configuration. It's cross-platform. That means it works on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, iOS and Android. And for Linux, that includes things like Red Hat and some very large Linux corporate setups. Key features include robust encryption, including column-level encryption, and that's very, very important with some new rules and regulations around there for Europe and the US for things like FIPS. And it also uses a single on-disk file format for easy deployment and a patented support for change synchronization. An example of someone that benefited from that kind of thing, this customer is eVendo AG, and they have a product called Omnichannel. And they did originally have all their data in lots of different silos, lots of different database types, lots of different database servers, lots of glue logic to glue the whole thing together. And it was costing their retail clients a lot of time and money and effort to keep that thing going. Instead of those separate systems for the web, point of sales, ERP and marketplaces, all the data now lives in a single InterBase database. They highlight the fact that the basis for the eVendo system is the consistency and live sharing of all data. The result? Retailers see the same prices, stock results and orders across every single channel. They support up to 6,000 orders per day and between 40 and 80 million euros in trading volume annually. It's not just popular with people like eVendo and their retail organizations. InterBase also runs behind the scenes in governments, financial firms, and enterprises like Overgas, Synergon, Armeets, Cargill, EY, PwC, and even the military. These organizations choose to use InterBase because it's reliable, secure, and robust enough for mission-critical workloads. It's even helped put the Mars rover on the planet Mars. It isn't on Mars, but it helped make that happen. That's how secure and robust it is. It also contains a thing called change views. It's a sync that just works. And so when you've got offline access, let's say your mobile device is out of range or your internet isn't working, it happens, or your customer is unable to synchronize the connection to the database for whatever reason, InterBase has a patented product called Change Views, or a feature called Change Views, which makes the synchronization of data very simple indeed. Instead of reloading whole data sets, apps can ask, hey, what changed since the last time I connected? A developer who was featured on Grey Matter explained, you can query local data for changes to push back or the server for changes to deliver to the device. This reduces the bandwidth costs, keeps mobile users current, and avoids heavy replication logic. Low maintenance and easy adoption. InterBase really excels at being admin light, low maintenance. One developer said, new staff only needed about 30 minutes to confidently understand the basics. They also described it as super robust and near admin free, making it a dream to work with. Businesses can ship products without hiring dedicated DBAs. And IT teams can focus on building features instead of maintaining the database. Security has always been at the core of InterBase. For example, from Sparsoft, achieving PA-DSS compliance using InterBase's database column encryption in addition to encrypted backups. Moving across to government agencies, protecting sensitive data. Customers rely on InterBase to safeguard critical information. Security has always been at the core. Encryption at rest and encryption in transit, the two big key words nowadays for data. Encryption and rest, making sure that even if someone can get to your database, they cannot read what's there. It's a requirement for both the UK, the Europeans, and the United States businesses to comply with this. Same with over-the-wire encryption or encryption in transit, a legal requirement in many cases. InterBase 15 helps you with that. And disaster recovery built into InterBase. It's not bolted on, you don't pay for an optional extra to get that. It's included with InterBase. Anyway, let's hand over to Marco, and he's going to talk about the new things in InterBase 15. Over to you.
Thanks, Ian. This is Marco, the InterBase product manager, and I want to start guiding you towards the new features in InterBase 15. InterBase 15 builds on the solid foundation of InterBase 2020 and the previous releases over the years. It's a robust database management system which can power both your largest enterprise applications, but also be embedded on your phones and mobile devices. So before we get to the features, a couple of things we want to cover. So why are we calling 15 and not 2025? We decided to stop using years for the major release. At times it's confusing, and we want to go back to a sequential version number. So after releasing 2017 version and 2020 version, this is now 15, and we expect the next one to be 16 and so on. Before we get into the actual features, let me recap the different editions and versions of InterBase. We have server editions. Server editions is the InterBase server per se. It's licensed per server and per user. So you can have a license for a server with 5 users or 25 or unlimited. And if you buy a number of user packs, you can add more users as your needs increase. InterBase Desktop is a edition you can install locally on a client along with an application. There is also an InterBase Developer Edition. This is a free download and free to use for developers while they are building an application powered by InterBase, but it cannot be used to deploy an InterBase solution to customers. The Developer Edition of InterBase is also included in RustStudio, and it already has a ready-to-use license as part of the RustStudio license. Also have embedded editions. This comes as DLL that you distribute with your application. There are 3 different embedded editions of InterBase. The names have slightly changed compared to the past. The first is InterBase To Go Lite. This is a free download and free distribution. It's also included in RustStudio, but you can also download it from the Embarcadero website. There is a special mobile edition, which is included for free with RustStudio Enterprise, and you can distribute embedded, the to-go full version with encryption and additional features to your mobile devices. There is also an InterBase To Go Pro version. This is generally sold as a yearly subscription with an unlimited number of deployments, so you can distribute as many copies of your application with InterBase To Go Pro embedded. And InterBase To Go Pro has all of the features of InterBase embedded, including first-class encryption and change views and all of the other high-level features that the embedded version of InterBase provides. I've already hinted at encryption and security. This is an area of significant enhancements in InterBase, but before we get to what is new in InterBase 15 for encryption and security, let's focus on the core concept, because InterBase has long delivered extensive support in this area. This release makes it even more powerful, but it's not like a new feature for InterBase. Quite the opposite. InterBase has been leading in the industry in terms of security and encryption support. It's a primary focus area for this release because we are making it even more powerful. Before we get to that, again, I want to mention that data encryption is really a must-have feature today. You cannot really think about building applications that store data in a database that is a file where anyone can look into and grab data. Of course, it's a mandatory if you have any sensitive data for your customers. Today, and probably even more tomorrow, it is fundamental to encrypt all of your data to ensure you are compliant with the new EU laws in terms of data handling and customer data protection, and the US laws and laws for many other countries around the world that are making encrypted data a real requirement for almost all information you store that is associated or can be associated with individual users and customers. What InterBase does is support different types of encryption. It's both for encryption of data in transit. When you have a client application that is accessing data on a server or sending data to a server, it's important that the data in transit is fully encrypted. Also, it's important to have encryption of data at rest. InterBase offers a very flexible support for encryption, meaning not only you can encrypt an entire database, but you can also encrypt only specific tables. Suppose you have a log table without any sensitive data and it's a very large table. Suppose you have some tables with images, again, not sensible to any compliance role. You can decide to leave those unencrypted for better performance. Same within a table, you can encrypt only specific columns with sensitive data. But honestly, while this was relevant years ago, where the encryption was putting a significant cost in terms of CPU and processing, considering today's CPU power, in most cases, you might just want to encrypt everything in your database. So with this overview of what is encryption in InterBase, how it works, and again, why encryption is fundamental in today's industry, you cannot really build application that keep customer data around. That is significant risk for your company and your business. With that insight, let's look at what specifically we are adding and changing in the support in this area in InterBase 15. The first thing we have done with InterBase 15 is move to OpenSSL 3.5. What is notable is not only this is a very recent version of OpenSSL, but it's also a long-term support version, meaning that 3.5 and 3.5 specific updates, so point updates, will be supported until April 2030. This gives us 5 years of reliable support with OpenSSL 3.5. We're going to deliver ongoing fixes, enhancements of version 3.5 as they become available. Now, as part of OpenSSL 3.5, we have moved client communication to TLS 1.2, and we can also move to higher standards, ensuring a stronger protection to your data in transit. In terms of encryption, InterBase has long been offering IES 256-bit encryption. It's not a new feature. What is new is that we're now making it the default and the only encryption method. In the past, we were offering IES 256-bit encryption along with other less secure encryption levels, but we want to make sure our customers do not inadvertently use these lower and not secure encryption levels, not secure by today's standard. They were when these features were introduced many years ago in InterBase. We want to make sure that if you enable encryption, which is not mandatory, but is highly recommended, you go with a high-grade encryption and something that is considered secure by today's standard. As a nice positive effect of this change, that we are making this encryption level also available in the Developer Edition. Previously, Developer Edition only had the less secure encryption levels. This means that whatever you are building and the structure and architecture and the encryption details of what you are building today in terms with the Developer Edition are the same that you are going to deploy to your customers with a full server edition. This encryption level is applied to both data at rest, so it's securing your database files on a computer, and data in transit, protecting the communication with the client library. That's not the only element in terms of security that's important. There's another element which is equally important, which is the passwords. We don't store passwords, we store hashed version of the passwords. We are moving to SHA-2 and specifically SSH-256 as the password digest format. It's important to have secure data, but it's also important to have secure access to the data, and having a strong password digest is fundamental to make sure that only authorized accounts and users can access the data in your database, following the rules that you determine in terms of data access and permissions. This is the password digest sent over the wire and stored in the database. We are still offering less strong encryptions. That is mostly because if you have an existing database and you are migrating, you might need to have a process for updating passwords and updating the user accounts. While the new stronger password digest is the default, we allow for the less strong options, but they're really meant only as a migration step while you're moving to full SHA 256. I won't get into the technical details, but the fact that we are changing the password digest implies some incompatibility risk. If you're using an older InterBase client library, it will not be able to access the password in a new InterBase 15 database with a stronger password digest. If you are using a InterBase 15 client library, it will be able to work with the old server because it will check for lower grade digests. But again, the recommendation is try to move all of your client and server to InterBase 15 and adopt the strongest encryption and password digests that are available in the database. On top of these technologies and security solutions, we have enabled support for FIPS. FIPS is US government standard, approved standard, part of the NIST, the National Institute of Standard Technologies. The standards we specifically support is FIPS 140-3. It ensures the compliance with specific government requirements, government and industry standard for non-military grade applications. This is an optional feature of InterBase that you can enable. If you enable it, you need to use encryption and the most secure password hashes. These are mandatory for FIPS compliant. Your business might not require FIPS compliance, specifically if you're not in the US and if you're in other areas of the world. The ability to claim that your application architecture and your database has this compliance, even if not required by your specific business, is a clear indication of the security grade of your solution. I mean, you're along with the database that you are embedding or distributing with your application. While this is the most important thing in InterBase 15, is not the only change to the database. We have also been doing some overall modernization of our tooling. First of all, InterBase for Windows is built with the most recent release version of Visual Studio, of Visual C++. The important thing to notice here is that using that version, the Visual C++ runtime that we ship, and if you don't have it already in your machine and InterBase depends on, can be updated automatically because it's a guarantee to remain compatible by Microsoft. There is more we have done and already released in the most recent updates of InterBase 2020 earlier this year, which is a rework of the installer. We moved to a much newer version of the installer. The specific point here is that the installer, not InterBase itself, but the installer and some of the licensing tool that come with InterBase, specifically on Linux, use Java runtime. The Java runtime dependency used to be on an older version of Java. Now we move to embedding Eclipse Temurin which is the most commonly used and most popular version of the OpenJDK available today. The last thing, which is actually very important and very visible to you as InterBase developers, is the improvements we've done to IB Console. IB Console over the last few years has seen a complete overhaul of its entire user interface. We haven't left anything untouched. We went through a complete UI redesign, moving in from an old classic look and feel and layout to a very modern Windows UI. We moved to high DPI support. We are rebuilding it with as a 64-bit Windows application. We have replaced all of the icons with new modern icons. We have really leveraged all of the core foundations and capabilities of the VCL library InterBase Console is built onto, and of the most recent version of Delphi, which is the language InterBase Console is built onto, to make sure that it works very nicely on Windows 11. On top of these continuous updates we've done over the last few years, we are introducing specific new features with the InterBase 15 release, from a new database encryption wizard that helps you define the encryption for your database, which is, again, one of the most important features, but it was slightly more difficult to configure that we would have liked. And now we're really making it much easier to set up encryption for your database. We're also introducing a new server database dashboard with a summary of the data and status of the database IB Console is connected to. We've improved the response of property sheet change, improved some of the report printing options, and done a very large number of usability improvements. IB Console remains the forefront and the most complete tool for managing your local, remote databases in development, but also to monitor them in production. Now, last thing I want to mention, it's the second last thing. We have also introduced support for new target platforms, more recent target platform compared, of course, to the time InterBase 2020 was released. We offered support for Windows Server 2025, for Red Hat Enterprise Edition 10, and for Ubuntu 24. The InterBase server from this release is available only as a 64-bit server. That means that you cannot install on a 32-bit version of Windows, if you can find one, which is kind of hard, and of Linux. Again, it's not these days is very uncommon. In terms of InterBase client libraries, the InterBase client libraries to connect to these 64-bit servers and can run on 32-bit operating systems, but even more can be loaded by 32-bit applications running on 64-bit operating systems. Like, as an example, suppose you have a Delphi application that is built as a 32-bit version. You need to load the InterBase client, the 32-bit version of the InterBase client library for Windows, and with that you can connect to the 64-bit server InterBase. The InterBase client library continue to remain available for 64-bit and 32-bit, depending on the operating system. Of course, it doesn't make sense to have a 32-bit version for iOS and macOS because they don't exist anymore. But for other operating systems, we offer client libraries with both bitness, and same when you're thinking about the embedded version, the to-go version, either Lite or the Pro version. They also remain available as both 32-bit and 64-bit, depending on the target operating system. I want to get to the real last thing that I want to mention in this introduction, which is the new support and maintenance model that we're rolling out along with InterBase. In the past, InterBase could be bought freely without maintenance and support. We really want to encourage our customer. We think it's fundamental for user that has deployed a database server to have continuous updates, security fixes, support if something goes wrong. We think this is a fundamental value of InterBase. And for this reason, we are now introducing a model where As you will buy InterBase 15, we will require you to also buy maintenance and support, and we strongly encourage you to keep updating the maintenance and support year after year to make sure that you have access to any future update of InterBase 15 server, that you will have access to major releases whenever we release a new major release of InterBase, rather than having to buy a brand new license as it happens today. And of course, because this is maintenance and support, you also have 3 support incidents every year in case something goes wrong or you have any problem with your InterBase server. These changes are for the InterBase server, meaning they do not apply to other editions of InterBase. The InterBase to Go Pro version and licensing model that we recommend is a subscription, which, as the name implies, is already a subscription. So you pay for 1 year, you have unlimited deployment, and then if you want to keep deploying new applications to new targets, you have to renew your subscription. The other scenario the support and maintenance model does not apply to is VAR contracts, value-added reseller contracts. We strongly encourage you, if you plan to release an application that requires deploying an InterBase server to a significant number of users, to contact our sales team and investigate for a VAR contract. VAR contracts allow you to have InterBase server available and to be allowed to distribute to your customers at a fraction of the single license price. InterBase Developer Edition remains free for 1 year. That's the change. It was free unlimited with unlimited time. Now it's free for 1 year, but you will be able to renew it over time. And if you already have RAW Studio and you have a RAW Studio with a subscription, the InterBase Developer Edition will be tied to that subscription and will remain available to you as long as your RAW Studio license remains current and active. This is all I wanted to cover, and with that I want to get the microphone and the screen back to Ian for the demos.
Thanks, Marco. Okay, so we're going to just take a quick look at a few things. First of all, this is IB Console. IB Console is your database controller. You can use things like Heidi SQL and other database management tools that understand InterBase, but IB Console is the native one. It's the one that comes with InterBase. I've got a few databases here. This is my local server, and I can log on to that. If I go into here, I can select this database, log in. There is a really secure password here. I'm using the default password. You should never use that in reality. And I can go and see what tables I've got here. So I've got some tables set up. I create these fairly quickly, and they're pretty straightforward. They've just got a couple of values in there. It's easy to create a table. If I wanted to create a new table, I can go into here and say create, and I can call it test table or something like that. And then I can add a field. There's different types of fields. So we're going to call this my field. The field kind, you just need to look in the help to understand what these are, but I can choose a data type. I can put a expression in here to computer data type, and they're all the kind of data types that you would expect with a database. So integer, small int, float, all the things you would expect. Timestamps, very, very useful, and decimals and a few other things like that. But for now, let's not worry about that. You've got a number of other tools in here. There's the IB Server Manager that allows me to do things like turn it off and on and restart it. If you're using development mode, the development interface, then you need to restart this every day. That's just a restriction so that you don't run it in production, so to speak. You need proper license for that. But apart from that, it does everything that you could want. All sorts of tools, license manager, diagnose connections. It's your home from home. It does a lot more. I'm not really going into details here. You can run ISQL, which is a interactive SQL command line. But let's just close that for a second, and let's go into RAD Studio. I've got a little app here, and it's a fairly straightforward FireMonkey app. I've got two things in here. I've got a data module. I'm just going to log into my database, so you don't normally set it up with your login set up straight away, but here's a data module that's creating some data and reading some data, and what it will do is manipulate a chart, and it looks a bit like this. It's a FireMonkey app, so this will work on Mac, this will work on Linux, and this will also work on Windows. The drivers by default should be Windows 64-bit. I strongly suggest, if you're still using Windows 32-bit, that you start considering trying to move over to 64-bit. It is going to be something that Microsoft are really pushing very hard for, and many of the database drivers, including InterBase, are 64-bit now, and it's just easier to do that. I'm actually using the 32-bit version of RAD Studio 13, but there's a 64-bit IDE. But anyway, here's a FireMonkey app. That's what it looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to run that. Let's close that down. Right now, it doesn't seem to be doing anything, but what I can do is I can go into here, and it will read the data directly from the InterBase database. These are T-charts, which come free with RAD Studio. Various types of T-chart, and you've got all sorts of interactivity and things like that. Very nice looking app. I'm actually going to use this in some demos later on. We're going to have Code Rage later this year, and I'll be demoing this kind of app and a few other pretty dashboards and things like that. Just to give you some idea of the speed, if I click on this, what it's going to do is zero out the charts, recreate the background data, and leave me with a blank screen. 1, 2, 3, instant. And if I now hit on this button here, it's actually going to read all the data in dynamically from an InterBase database instantly like that. Very, very fast, all very secure. If you enable FIPS and things like that, there's documentation to explain that for InterBase 15. You've got one of the most secure databases out there. It's compliant, data encrypted at rest, data encrypted in transport, and FIPS compliancy can be turned on as well, which makes it even more secure for financial transactions and things like that. Anyway, that's InterBase, and just a quick tour of what it can do. Great database, got a lot of respect for what it can do. Simple app, simple demo app, and that's it.